So we've all had a day to think about it. Paddy the Baddy versus Tony Ferguson. Are you guys starting to see where this fight is perfect? Because I feel as though it needed a beat. There was something about it, and I'm not sure what that something was. Perhaps it was Tony Ferguson getting signed again. Perhaps it was Tony Ferguson getting signed again off of a loss against a guy who's off of a win. Or Tony off of 2 losses, off a guy of 2 wins. Or Tony having 6 fights in a row that were losses versus a guy who's never lost within the UFC. I mean, but where would your problems come from? I don't know why we think there's a rule that guys who won fight guys who won and guys who lost fight guys who lost. I understand as a policy, and if you were to look at the numbers, that happens more often than not. But there's definitely different losses within different victories. Can we agree on that? Can we agree Tony Ferguson having those 6 fights, but none of those guys were outside of the top 10 is very different than Paddy having a number of wins against guys who never were within the top 10? Can we agree on something like that? And who would you put as the advantage versus the disadvantage? You have a guy that's active and busy and doing it, regardless of outcome. He's active and busy and doing it. He's going through the steps, not only the training camps, but all of the anxiety and all of the emotions that come once you sign that bout agreement. Dealing with the travel, going to hotels, beating the scale, getting warmed up with your hands wrapped and making that walk. Feeling all of those things. We have one guy that's been doing that within Tony Ferguson. We have another guy who has not done any of those things. A guy that was hurt, a guy that was injured. A guy whose number one focus between now and UFC 296 will not be on Tony Ferguson. It will not be on rankings. It will not be climbing the ladder. It will not be making money. His number one focus will be to make weight. And you must understand, there's no part of me that is giving Paddy the Baddy a hard time. The way this narrative has come out is that Paddy is way up here and Tony is way down here in a hole. So instead of climbing Tony out of that hole and getting him up the rung, yeah, I'm pulling Paddy down a little bit, but I am telling the story the way that it happened. My freshman year of high school, I had one goal going into the state tournament. It was to the point that I told people, my only goal is to make weight. I don't care how this event goes at all. I don't care who I wrestle, I just want to make weight. I need that part over. I know I can beat all of them. I don't know that I can make weight. I will have a fair opportunity to go out there and compete and try to have more points than the other guy. I don't know if I can get that scale to say 115 pounds. So when I talk to you about a full focus, or at least number one focus, being on making weight, I'm coming from a very personal standpoint. And when you have that frame of mind, it is a difficult thing to do to get focused in on that fight and come up with any kind of strategy and or plan, because you have 24 hours to do it. That will never be part of it until after you get off of that scale. So he'll go back to his room, he'll come up with a strategy, and he'll move forward with Tony Ferguson. I understand that Paddy's the favorite in this fight. I understand that Paddy can win this fight. I'm just letting you know there's a number of things, if you're checking boxes, that go into the against Paddy category as well. Michael Bisping came out and talked about this. Michael was very polite to Tony. He said, man, that's not an easy fight for anybody. Yeah, well said. Well said by Michael. Michael also thought that it was a lose-lose for Paddy. That if he loses to Tony Ferguson, that, of course, isn't helpful. But if he beats Tony Ferguson, that, of course, isn't going to help, because it's what he's expected to do. The rankings are already reflected in it, by example. And that part I don't know that I would agree with. I saw the card. The card is laid out, starting from the top. The last one to walk will be Leon Edwards. His opponent will be Colby Covington. Underneath that, got the Pantasio title fight. Underneath that, any guesses? Tony Ferguson versus Paddy Pimblett. And where that becomes interesting is underneath that, You have number 11 in the world versus number 10 in the world, with Ian Gary versus Vincent Luque. Underneath that, you have number 5 in the world with Stephen Thompson taking on Rachmanov, who's never lost to anybody in this world. Right? So, I mean, you have absolutely top-ranked guys that are going to be jerking the curtain for Paddy and Ferg. I don't know if I see those as a lose-lose. I've heard a number of people not want to do fights, and they'll say because it doesn't make sense. And I've heard that expression since 1993. I have never had anybody lay out their case and be right. I have never heard of a reason to not do a fight because public perception will work against you. It will make you look so bad. It will harm you. I've never seen that. I've never seen somebody win and get released. I've never seen somebody win and make less money. I've never seen somebody win and return to a card in a lower placement. I've never seen somebody win and not get media. I've never understood what it doesn't make sense means. I've never seen that. And if Tony Ferg, who's lost 6 in a row, versus Paddy the Baddy, Paddy the Baddy's goal isn't even to beat Tony Ferg. And if he does, he doesn't get anything for it. It doesn't move him up. It doesn't move him one step closer. Number one goal is to make weight. So you got a guy that's lost 6 in a row against a guy whose biggest goal is to make weight. That's still the third biggest fight of the night, and frankly, that would be the co-main event if you didn't have to show respect to Pantoja and his opponent. If you could see that entire card, see 2 matches, you'd take Leon and Colby, but then you'd take this one. So the fight that doesn't make sense and the fight that a lose-lose, in your mind and within your desires to watch, you're much more drawn and compelled to it than you are some of the top-ranked guys in the world. And I'm with you on that. I just don't think that we need to deny it. We don't need to pretend that this is an out with an old and in with the new. We don't have to pretend that Tony Ferguson can't win this fight. We don't have to pretend that a guy in Paddy the Baddy whose full focus is on making weight, oh, by the way, and nursing and rehabbing whatever was wrong with him in the first place, which I think was a leg. That could have been a knee, a hip, or a foot, but I feel like it was something with that appendage. You don't know what's going to happen in this fight. This is anybody's ball game. And yeah, there's some knocks on Tony's record. There's a real positive, which is within his entire career, he was willing to fight anybody at any time. And apparently that dog inside of him hasn't changed. The only difference is now he's taken on a guy who hasn't done it in a year, is nursing an injury, and his biggest goal is to beat the scale.